Welcome to Memory Health Made Easy podcast. I'm your host, Dave Norris. This is episode 3, where we lift the lid on whether brain training games really work. If you have enjoyed our conversations today and you haven't done so already, please subscribe because this is the best way you can know when a new episode is released. Of course, if you like today's conversation, I'd encourage you to share it with others, liking it, discussing it, and hopefully putting you in a better position to apply it. You can find more of today's resources that we discuss in the show over at memoryhealthmadeeasy.com episode 3, where you get show links as well as references and links to our free resource, which is the 9 Principles for Memory Health for Life, where it is very much all those lifestyle things that can have a tangible impact on reducing your risk for memory loss. So let's get into today's episode.
This is the Memory Health Made Easy podcast, the show where you learn practical tips and experts share advice on what you can do to boost your brain span to match your lifespan. Now to the host of the show, David Norris.
Hi, welcome to the Memory Health Made Easy podcast. My name is Dave Norris and I'm on a mission to reach more, serve more, and to create more memory health in people. And I want to thank you very much for joining me on today's episode. You see, I found myself at my local coffee shop the other day. It's a ritual that I do over a fairly regular basis. My wife and I catch up once a week and without kids and in a space which is really comfortable for us. As I was walking out, I saw over the shoulder of a lady who was in her early 60s, tapping away at her phone, and the screen flashed up with a picture of a brain on some fairly skinny legs, a face that was smiling, and with an explosion of confetti and muscles being pumped at the side like bicep curls, really showing that she'd done a great job with that particular activity. I was intrigued. I was kind of curious as to what she was using, so I leaned over and politely introduced myself and said, "Could you tell me what you're doing? I saw your phone show a picture of a brain and I'm really curious." And she replied, "Well, I do books, Scrabble, and solitaire." "Oh, I love my solitaire," she said to me. And that was the game she was playing. And the picture of the brain was a flash of the completing of the solitaire game, of getting it out successfully. And I thought, what a really interesting experience for this person. She is believing that she is exercising her mind, which she is, but is it really translating to real benefits to her brain? Is she pumping it and growing it and physically getting the results as implied by the brain which was flexing its muscle? I guess this opens up the door of some fairly murky waters around cognitive science and its interpretation into online games. So I guess if I was asked for a show of hands for everyone that was listening here, who has tried brain training, I'd probably see, roughly 75% of us probably owning up to say, yeah, I've dabbled. For many of us, there's often a cost involved in using some of these games. Not only that, we are relying on the validity of how well these exercises are going to translate to improved cognitive benefits, improved cognitive fitness, to reduce your risk in the long term for memory loss. So how do they stack up? Well, that's what we're going to dive into. So let's say you've signed up for a brain training app and you're applying exercises that challenge attention, memory, and visual processing speed, for example. Now, these are the common ones that folk might use. The trouble is that what has been observed is that exercises of this type have a very narrow effect. Narrow in the terms of it doesn't go any wider to other cognitive skills. So if we practice attention, for example, it's not going to translate to insight, awareness, and judgment. So they have a very, small, narrow focus, as opposed to the desired effect, which is what we're sort of buying into as having a broad effect, meaning that if I do these particular exercises, they're going to translate to other cognitive skills and, even further, to domains in my life. I'll be better at doing certain tasks. The analogy I like to use here is to think about dropping a stone in a pond. As you drop a rather large stone in the pond, it's going to ripple out and affect further and further out those waves as it radiates out from the centre. Now, if you drop a pencil, a sharp stick or a pencil into the water, it's going to have a very limited impact. It's going to have very minimal translation to other areas of the pond. Now, the same goes with these type of exercises. And the evidence is fairly clear is that they have a very narrow effect. Meaning that if you do the games and you're focusing on the attention exercise, well, guess what? You're going to get fairly good at the attention exercises of that particular game. You're going to have a very narrow effect on your brain. There is one exercise, and we're going to talk about that shortly, that has a broad impact, and that the evidence stacks up that doing this one exercise is a fairly good place to start. Now, I don't want us to think that all brain training applications or games aren't going to be without their benefits. They do, and I've used them very successfully with other clients. But in determining which one is going to be good for me or which one is worth my dollars and energy, that's probably the most important question is, are they going to stack up? And given that there's been a number of legal cases out there affecting some of the most well-known companies that are out there marketing their wares, I think it's important that we go through what I think are 8 critical factors when you're trying to figure out whether you're going to buy into and use a brain training application or a game. So these 8 principles I've come up with thinking about, well, what is it that I wish most people knew up front and have front of mind in vetting, in going through a bit of a checklist of whether this is worth it or not. You might look all good on the front end with a glossy brochure or the glossy presentation of the brain training and the implied benefits. However, I think it's important for us to have maybe a citizen scientist hat on and cast a critical eye at, is this worth my time and dollars? So, number 1, do they report or does it report the evidence base for that program or that game? Is it validated? Meaning, do they make publicly known the evidence that they're using to build their program? And also, is there an established evidence history? Do they demonstrate in trials or in other ways, that case studies even, which is a little bit weaker, of the effectiveness of their particular tool? Number 2, does the program promise to establish a personal baseline for you? You want to know where you are at. Starting from a point of unknown gives you great incentive to move from the point 0 or day 0 to day 20. And you want to see those changes over time. Are programs challenging? And this is important about us achieving the change in our particular skills. Are they challenging? Are they continually challenging? Do they adjust and change that level of difficulty or level of challenge as you play the game? And I think that's an important point, is you don't want to come to the end of a particular game and go, oh, that was kind of easy. It needs to be a little bit closer. It needs to be a little bit more real time to your performance. Does it target a specific skill set? Is it focusing on a skill set cognitively? And what are the potential benefits of targeting that skill set? And I think the 3 that are worth, bearing in mind are our auditory and visual processing and memory. That speed of processing and speed of detection, as well as recall, are probably 3 very important skills to focus on, particularly as we get older. Are the programs novel and engaging? There is nothing worse than doing the same thing over and over again. Well, guess what? It's not going to be challenging, and it is certainly not going to be novel and engaging. It's not going to resonate with you to get up out of bed and have a crack at it. Has it got auditory, so hearing, and visual components, so things that challenge our visual processing and auditory processing, our sound processing? Are those components involved in the program? And I think that's a critical component. Number 7, does it track your performance over time? Do you get to see where you sit against your peers? Does it track your performance against yourself or against your baseline starting point? Tracking your performance is critical, particularly to motivate and challenge us to perform better. And lastly, in number 8, does it give you feedback? Does it tell you hey, these are areas to focus on. These are the things you got where the errors occurred and what you can do to improve it. I think these 8 principles are awesome points to take on board about when you're considering whether you're going to spend your dollars and time and energy on these brain training programs. Now, if we were to flip back to the lady that was completing solitaire, I think we're going to miss out a number of those points. Number 1, does it report an evidence? No, it doesn't. Is there an established baseline? No, there isn't. Are there programs, are they challenging? Potentially, but does it scale in time too? No, it doesn't. Does it target a specific skill set? Are we knowing what that is? No, it doesn't. Novel engaging? Yes. Has it got auditory and visual components? No, it's pretty much a visual game. Does it track your performance over time? Only those that you get right and those that you don't get out. Does it provide feedback? No, it doesn't. So I guess when we look at that particular exercise that lady in the coffee shop was completing, it really didn't hit all of those 8 points that I think are critical when we're looking at brain training programs. So the question really and the promise is around brain training is, can it improve your memory? Can it help prevent dementia? Can it improve your IQ? Can it improve your intelligence, more to the point? Can it help when you're suffering from mild cognitive impairment? Or maybe I'm personally feeling I'm not as sharp and I want to really practice some specific skills. Is it going to help with that? Well, I think that's still a fairly murky space for us. And there is a split research field about the effectiveness of these programs. However, there is one exercise that has stood out head and shoulders above the others, and I want to talk to you about that now. It's called the dual N-back exercise. So dual being D-U-A-L, then N for Nelly, back exercise. And it was created by Susan Yagi and her team in 2008. Unlike many other training exercises that we've discussed earlier, exercise such as the dual N-back is proven to transfer training results to other brain activities. And this effect has been confirmed by a number of scientific studies since the original in 2008, where fluid intelligence has been improved. And that's that ability to reason and solve new problems independently of previously acquired knowledge. Not only that, there has been a study done by Johns Hopkins University that showed a 30% improvement in working memory. The team at Johns Hopkins had discovered as well the optimal time to do the training, 1 to 2 hours before sleep. The ingredients that were successful for this were looking at around 20 to 30 minutes per day. Make sure that the activities were rewarding and novel, and subsequently, if you tied it to a good sleep, you're then able to consolidate the benefits. And if we go full circle back to our 8 principles, they also found that the games needed to have, or the applications needed to have, a sense of monitoring and keeping abreast of your performance over time. So essentially, we've got to track it. Looking at the original study, Yagi said something, and her team said something very profound, and it still rings true today. And that is that the effects are relatively temporary of doing this exercise. So we need to look at it from a dose perspective, that to maintain the cognitive gains, it's important that we come back and dose up on this particular exercise over time. So it may be helpful to dose up on a quarterly basis if you're relatively well. If you're having some challenges cognitively and you're wanting to work at it, you might require a little shorter time frame to continually improve and achieve the gains over time. So is this the magic golden bullet that will achieve all our dreams and reduce our risk for memory loss? Well, the good news is it stands to reason, and from the rationale of the science, that this is part of your toolkit, but it is just not the one thing. In fact, we've got to do many things to reduce our risk for memory loss. And so we can't do without those things that are relevant to our biological risk factors. And that's going to be the sleep, exercise, eating, our ongoing education, mindset are all powerful tools, managing our stress improving our social relationships. These are the things in a combined way that are going to reduce our risk for memory loss over time. So look, brain training is certainly helpful for many of us. I suggest use it wisely. Be mindful of those 8 principles when you're determining how you spend your dollars on these type of programs and games. And think of it kind of like going to the gym for your brain. It's a training exercise. And as such, like any training exercise, we need to think about applying it in the real world. There's no point going to the gym and thinking you're going to turn up for the World Cup soccer and perform at that level. You need to apply it in real world terms. So think about your mental capabilities in terms of arm days, leg days, etc. But I would suggest that think some diversity, but make sure in the core of what you're doing, you've got good sound exposures to the dual N-back exercise. And doing so, I think, will certainly help improve your memory health over time. My name's Dave Norris, and you've been listening to today's show of the Memory Health Made Easy podcast. Thank you for being here. If there's anything you take away today, I hope it is apply the 8 principles, those things that you can check off your brain training app with. And also consider how you might be able to access the dual N-back exercise as part of your brain training programs. And if it's not, that would be one I would certainly recommend. My goal is to make memory health super easy so you can start to reduce your risk for memory loss. One way you can help me is leave a review. I would love a review because it supports us here on the platform on iTunes, and it helps us reach potentially more people, which is what I'm about, is to reach more, serve more, and to create more memory health. Thank you very much, and subscribe as well if you haven't done so, because that's a great way we can stay in touch. I look forward to speaking to you in the next episode, and if you've, of course, got any questions, feel free to reach out. Again, my name is David Norris, and this is the Memory Health Made Easy podcast. The purpose of Memory Health Made Easy podcast is to educate and to inform. It is no substitute for professional care by a doctor or qualified professional. This podcast is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or personal professional advice or services. Instead, we would encourage you to discuss your options with a healthcare provider who specializes in your particular needs.